I was very tempted to, just because most of you that I know know the story of Jesus, I was so tempted to just have you leave and go tell somebody else tonight. I mean, honestly, so that's the thing about church is you have the key to the greatest story ever told, and we tend to just tell it to ourselves over and over and over. So make sure that you tell the story of Jesus to somebody who hasn't heard it yet, or somebody think they've heard it. And this is my hope tonight. If you think that you've heard it and you haven't heard it, I hope that you hear it a little bit differently. It's interesting hearing my daughter. There's part of me that wants to press her in front of everybody. I want to press. Because she's so cute and she's good. I want to pull out more, but I want to see, what do you mean when you say Jesus died for our sins? What do you mean when you say he took our pain? What does that mean? It's interesting that her instinct is the instinct that we all have as children in Sunday school and in the Christian faith, and that is to emphasize the part of the cross that's emphasized to us, and that is the bearing of our sins. That's fascinating. It's not the most fascinating thing about the cross to me. That's not what I think of when I think of Great Friday. It's a part of it. Propitiation is the term that's used to talk about what happened on the cross. I don't think it fully captures the cosmic weight of everything that happened on the cross. And to me, Great Friday is amazing because it reveals the most ridiculous story ever conceived by a religion. It's the absurdity of it that makes it so compelling to me. It's not my role in it. It's not my sins. It's the fact that it's so ridiculous that it must be true. Something so patently absurd cannot be invented by man. Today is Great Friday, often called Good Friday by Protestants and Catholics. Let me just read it tonight, okay? We good? It is among my favorite holidays that Christians celebrate. And the reason that I hold it in such high esteem is because it's multifaceted. It is the climax to the greatest story in human history. It is the victory of grace over law. It is the day that death became mortal. It is the day that religion ended and kingdom began. I know we don't talk about that one much, but that's true. It is the inversion of everything we should expect a religious story to be. And above all, it is a holiday that has within its remembrance the reason that I believe Christianity is true. Because if I was trying to make up a religion, there would be no Great Friday in it. I would not be sophisticated enough to subvert expectation to such a degree. You see, I would go the route of most apologetics, Grace. Apologetics, and I would try to construct perfect arguments and scenarios around God's absolute control and authority. I would ensure that every human remained a human and every God remained a God. Sensible, right? You following me? Ashley, you good? You following me? Every human should remain a human in a religion, and every God should remain a God. I would have the sense to know that the greatest impediment to belief in God is not argument. It's not the facts around evolution. It isn't textual criticism. It's not biblical scholarship. The greatest impediment to belief in God is the frailty of the human experience. I would do everything in my power to create distance between the experience of God and the experience of man. I would explain away our existence while emphasizing the value and importance of God, which would remain forever out of reach. My religion, like most religions, would work because it would blame humans for their misery while making something unseeable and unreachable the key to that misery's end. My religion would work because I would teach man to fear God and to hate himself, which is something that comes all too easy to us. My religion would work because it would emphasize the escape of this experience and the hopeful encounter of another, more perfect one, mediated by our submission to God's will. That is what man-made religions do. That's what they emphasize. They make excuses for human frailty. They create exemptions to it. They separate the reality of it from the reality of the supernatural. But this is not what Great Friday does. Painting a different church for different people. Great Friday does something remarkable. Great Friday does exactly the opposite of everything I would aim to do when I went to create my religion. Great Friday culminates around one central claim. What is that claim? What is that claim? I'm asking you what that claim is. I want to hear you say it. What is that claim to you? Why are we here? This is the day that humans murdered God, who is also a human. This is the day that I heard sins were dealt with. This is the day that God overcomes death. This day has all of those components, but the one that is most interesting to me is this is the day that humans murdered God, who was also human. That is the ultimate expression of the only thing that I care about, the only reason that I'm here, the only reason I'm speaking, the only reason I've done this thing that we call ministry, the only reason I come to this building and look at these lights and see this cross that has such a heavy weight to it, but has become a symbol of nursery rhymes. The reason I do all this is because of something that I call, and was called before I said it, incarnational theology. That is that Jesus is not simply a Messiah, he's not simply a prophet, he's not simply a man, but he's something far more important and far more relevant to us. That is, he is God. And he is God in the flesh. This is a doctrine that would be formally called hypostasis. And in order to be a good Christian, you have to believe this doctrine. And there's a lot of doctrines that I don't think we really understand, even while we defend them. I can talk to you about the Trinity all day, but I gotta be honest with you. I can't get my head around it. I could defend the stalwarts of the faith all day, but I'm not really that passionate about a lot of them, even though I'll be like, oh, this is doctrine, this is, I mean, it's just what we do. Oh, is this too honest? It's just what we do. But there's one doctrine that is a make or break doctrine for me. It is the doctrine of hypostasis. That Jesus is fully man and fully God. He's fully man and he's fully God. Without this doctrine, I do not care about Christianity. I do not care about religion. I care about nothing outside of the fact that this man that I'm talking about tonight was killed by people like me, but he was also God. Hear me. We are here tonight because we claim that on this day, some 2,000 years ago, humans killed God, not a man, not a good man, not a God, not a symbol of God or his will, but God.
Yes, sir. Come on.
God. This is the climax to the story that is our faith. It isn't the resolution. The resolution comes in a few days. But this is the climax. See, we make a mistake, Grace. You're here, I'm gonna talk to you tonight because you're going through that. And you know what? You are too, Saxon. You're doing the seminary thing. Both of y'all are learning, and that's all good, but there's a part of me that clenches up and gets nervous because what we start to do is we start to teach systematic theology. I'm not a big fan of systematic theology. I'm a big fan of narrative theology. I like the fact that this is a story first, and this story has a climax, and tonight is its climax. This is the climax of everything that started in Genesis when he said you're gonna bruise his heel, but he's gonna crush your head.
Yes, sir.
This is the climax of everything that came out of Genesis all the way through the Gospels. And the epistles after this climax are the resolution of how it relates to us. And they call us a living epistle, which means that we are an extension to the story with our own beginning, our own climax, and our own resolution. And if we take away the power of the story, we fundamentally take away the power of the faith. And a lot of times what seminary does is it strips down the story into components that if we recite it, we're a good Christian, but none of us live the story because we become disconnected from it. And I hate that because this is a living faith, a faith that should make you wrestle, a faith that should make you squirm, a faith that should make you question. If you came to Christianity easily, I have questions for you because it's ridiculous. It's absurd on its face. And it's nevertheless true. If you think about it, you have to move through something before you get to profundity. You have to move through absurdity. It is this absurdity that makes me understand God and this faith to the point where it genuinely brings me to my knees, not out of ritual and not out of obligation, but out of sheer weight of its magnitude. I can say that the absurdity of Great Friday and the fact that it is nevertheless true is something that genuinely fills my heart with things that I can't explain or understand. It fills me with love. It fills me with awe. It fills me with mystery. It fills me with wonder. I actually feel guilt to some extent because I say that I love people, but I've never loved anybody the way that God loves them. I say that I love my wife, but I've never loved my wife and probably not even my children the way that God claims to love me. I think about how if I was constructing a God for us to worship, I would do it around everything that I am not. Because I'm weak and I'm tired and I'm embarrassed and I get my feelings hurt and I'm frail and I'm gonna die one day and I get sick and my knee hurts as I get older. I can feel my dad's arthritis starting in my hands. And I go, is this what a God looks like? And is this what a God experiences? And if I were to take all of you and set you down in a circle and we were to have a course where we invented our religion, we would come up with something like L. Ron Hubbard. We would come up with Scientology. We would come up with Dianetics. We would come up with Islam. Makes a lot of sense. Islam makes sense. Submission to God. Don't worry about man, it's all about him. And there's never the twain shall meet. I can conceive of Judaism, which keeps the separation and the barrier between God and man pretty firm. You get to meet him in a temple if you do all the right things. He shows up a little bit, and a few people who are properly chosen get to see him, but the rest of you wait outside. I could come up with that. I could come up with all of the things that create distance between me and God. And I think all of you would follow the same measure, but I don't think any of you are creative enough to say, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna make God born in a manger. I'm gonna make God come out of a woman who experiences the birth pains and the screams and the blood and everything that comes with it. I'm gonna make God have friends as children who then one day will have to watch him hang from a tree. I'm gonna make a God whose lungs are gonna collapse as he says, it is finished. I'm gonna make a God who is the fountainhead of all creation, through whom Colossians says everything emerges. That without him, the very atoms that are vibrating to keep this world together would fall apart and dissipate. He is the first material being. Out of all things, matter emerges from his mouth. I believe that without his very body, the universe would dissipate. I believe that. when it says that all things are through him and for him and will return to him, I think there is a literalness to that. And yet this God will be taken by his own creation and beaten and mocked and spit upon and fed vinegar. He'll thirst. And he'll say, my father, why have you forsaken me? They'll say he's king of the Jews. They'll say, look at your king. And he'll bleed out in front of us. Sherman, if you came up with that story, I'd say this class isn't for you. If this was your religion, I would say that ain't gonna cut it. Nobody's gonna follow that. Nobody wants that kind of God. The reality is that all of us want that kind of God. We just can't conceive of a God that would want us in that way. This is the power of Christianity. That when you look at the claims that it makes, that 2,000 years ago, this man rose from the dead, validating him as God. And you stare in the face of that and you say, how am I getting to this claim? And you begin to look at your life and you realize you didn't get there through an apologetic argument. You didn't get there simply out of tradition, but you got there because the evidence is stacking up that there's something greater than us who is observing me and helping me and whispering to me, and everything that has formed meaningfully in my life has done so in the name of Jesus. And for some reason, when I call upon this name, there's a well of power that I do not experience in any other setting and in any other name. And for some reason, this name and this story and this faith and this God-man produces results that nothing else produces. And it's not simply about what I gain out of it. When I say results, I don't simply mean a healing here or a prophecy there, all of which come, but I mean a surety that I am being watched by a Father who is greater than me, that my life has been drawn before I was ever emerged from my mother's womb, that there was promises spoken about me before I was formed, that things said about me now were echoed about me in heaven before eternity ever came forth in this realm. And I experience things that I go, yes, there is a God. And yes, his name is Jesus. And the more that I'm in alignment with that reality, the more that I see the underlying reality of this truth that we call Christianity. But it all starts with the absurdity, and I never want to move past the absurdity too quickly because it's beautiful. And it's in this absurdity that God reveals the depth of his character. It's this absurdity. It's this Knight Saxon that when you ask me who my favorite writers of the Bible are, I can easily say Paul and John. It's in this absurdity that when you ask me what my favorite scriptures are, I can refer to Galatians. I can refer to John and 1 John. When you ask me which of the Gospels knew Jesus the most, I can quickly say John. It's this absurdity that allows me to do this because it's in this absurdity that started so long ago that the only conclusion that we could come to is that Jesus is God and God is love, and that is all that matters. It's ridiculous. Let me show you what I mean. I had a neighbor at my old house. I am going to tell this story. This is part of my Good Friday message. And I want you all to really think about what I'm about to say. And then I'll be done. I had a neighbor. Let's call him Bob. Or let's call him Johnny. I'm just kidding. Bob comes over, introduces himself. This is the first day we ever met this guy. He's in our garage. And we're talking to him, and I'm having a good conversation. And then it starts to get a little awkward because I smell something. And then he goes, oh. And I go, what's going on, Bob? And I'll spare you what he says exactly, but he says, I use the bathroom. I just use the bathroom, and I'm stunned. I go, you use the bathroom? And he said, yeah, I've got loose bowels. I've got an issue here. And I said, no worries, man. It happens to all of us. What do you do in that situation? I'm like, it's a very human thing. It happens to all of us. And we're talking to this guy, and I'm like, Bob, I get it. And we're just sitting there, and I'm trying to continue a conversation. My wife comes in the garage, and she's like, oh my gosh, yes, it happens to all of us. And fortunately, the previous owners had cats, so they left cat litter. And my wife takes the cat litter and dumps it because it was a mess. And I'm sitting there, and we're trying to carry on this conversation as normal. And I'm like, how do you have a normal conversation after this? My wife, for those online, are talking about how he just welcomed himself into the home. And I was so struck by that moment. And of course, we had good laughs, and me and that guy became buddies, and I was fine with it. But I thought, there is nothing more human than this. There's nothing fun. Like when I think of humanity, this is what I think of. This is the raw element of humanity, because we're fragile, we're embarrassed, we're limited. We want control so bad, but we lack it so much, even over the most basic functions sometimes. The reality is as much as I was appeasing him, I was also telling the truth that yes, every single one of us have been in a situation like that, sadly. I mean, maybe not, now that I'm looking at your faces. But proximate, adjacent, embarrassment adjacent. We've all been caught picking our nose in grade school, right? Eating our boogers, maybe? I don't know. No, never, no. I mean, I had my Batman underwear when I was in first grade, and I got made fun of by the whole school. The whole class, I should say, not the whole school, that's dramatic. But, I'm embarrassed. My wife on our second date accidentally blurted out, I love you. And I just stared at her, and I was like, oh, and I didn't say it back. I was just like, oh yeah, oh. Wow, thank you. She was humiliated. Yeah, what do you do, right? And that's how I see the human experience. It's full of embarrassment. It's a riches of embarrassment. It's a riches of fragility. And then all of us know what it's like to be doing life, and then all of a sudden somebody you love is gone. I know enough of your stories. I know my stories. I could probably point to fewer people in this room. As a matter of fact, I can't point to anybody in this room that has not experienced the sudden loss of somebody that they love. Through cancer, through suicide, through other people's hands. Life is fragile. One moment you're going and playing sports with someone and having a good time and a good laugh, and the next moment you're getting a phone call to either visit them in the hospital or to prepare their funeral. And this is the experience by which I know my God. This is what God chooses to do when he expresses himself. This is what he chooses to enter. A field of embarrassment, sickness, pain, death, loss. The God of the universe that knows all things, that forms all things, that sets all things in motions, that knows his own fate, looks at his mother standing at his feet, knows that she is going to lose a son and that his plan is what's going to make it happen. Looks to John and says, take care of it like it's your mother. This is what he chooses. This is what the King of the universe chooses. He could have me march around his throne 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times a day, saying, holy, 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 like a cherub, but he could do anything he wants. We could all be whatever he wants us to be, say whatever. And this is what God chooses to do. He chooses embarrassment. He chooses. And don't get it twisted. There is nothing about what happened on this day that he did not author. You think that God was taken by surprise when they wrote King of the Jews and put a crown of thorns in his head? You think that that was the one part of the plan that he didn't think was going to happen, that was a shade too far? You think That God knew about the crucifixion but didn't think about the cat of nine tails? And the length of walk that he'd have to walk where he wouldn't be strong enough to carry the cross and he'd drop it and Simon would have to come and assist him? You think that he didn't know about that part, or he was blind to it, or somehow there's some element of this story that he did not know or somehow forgot? God says all of it. I am choosing, I am designing, I am walking to all of it. What do I do with that, Rachel? Where do I go after? What do I do with my life after that? The moment that I say, yes, Jesus, you are Lord. Yes, you know what? You are God. And I went through the exact progression of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where each one of them are wrestling with who this man is. And only John commits at the end and says, no, this is the true and living God. He's not just the Son of God. He's not just the Messiah, but this is God in the flesh. Before all time began, he was, and he is, and he will forever be. And if you become a Christian, you go through this progress because you're looking and you're saying, could this really be the one, just like they did in the Bible? Could you be the one? Then you get to a point when you realize what's happening, Saxon, that the hope becomes too big that it can shatter your heart. One of my favorite stories is about a comic book writer named Grant Morrison, who is not a Christian. He's an occultist. And I love this story because he would write himself into stories and then they would manifest and he would do all these occult things. It's fascinating. But there was a time that he was about to die. He got very, very sick and he was about to die, and he entered a trance state, and all of a sudden he saw Jesus. And Jesus emerged and looks at him and he sees this fierce Christ. And Christ says, I am not the God of your fathers. I am the stone that breaks all hearts. And I'll say that line randomly because I love it. Not only does it have biblical reference in it that he's the cornerstone, but the stone that breaks all heart, that destroys all illusions, but also that destroys self-hatred, that destroys shame, that destroys hiding. Because if I truly believe that this is the story of God, then I believe that there is nowhere I can go that he will not find me. If I truly believe that this is the story of God, then I believe that my sins are never big enough to be overcome by his love. If this is the story of God, then this means that his love for me is so obsessive, he'll go to places I wouldn't dare go for him. In order to see me whole. It becomes a hope so great that the reason I can come before you and say I don't care about anything else is because this hope is so intoxicating. This hope is so rewarding that if you take away Jesus from me, I don't care if there's heaven at this point. I don't care what rewards there are. I don't care what rituals get me. You have told me something too good. You have shown me something too true. You have shown me something too perfect about God. You take that away from me and I have nothing left. And it is found in Jesus and Jesus alone. And it is found in Great Friday. I'm so excited that on Sunday, I get to see him walk out of the tomb. I'm excited to see him walk out of the tomb. But I want to live here for a minute. I want to stand under the shadow of the cross for a minute to know that a guy that was abandoned by his family, that other people could choose to walk away from, a God that made everything, nailed to a cross, thinking of me. I'm excited about Sunday, but I want to live here for just a second. Because if I'm loved this much, then what right do I have not to love others? If I'm loved this much, what right do I have to give up on others? If I'm loved this much, what right do I have to construct religious boundaries, keeping others out of what he gave me freely? The absurdity is so much, and I have so much more to this message. First, we say it's a crucified Jewish Messiah, the one that's supposed to rescue Israel, executed by Rome. Messiahs don't get crucified, they win wars. They conquer territories. This looks like failure, not victory. Little did we know that he would eclipse both the religion and the empire that crucified him. Second, we call him the universal king, and this is a universal king who's fragile. He's not distant, he's not untouchable, he's not Alexander the Great. But he's beaten, he's bleeding, he's exposed. This is not how kings rule. This is how men are broken. And finally, we get to the most absurd claim of all, the one I've emphasized, that this is God. Not representing God, not sent by God, but God. A God who can be mocked, a God who can be humiliated, and a God who can die at the hands of his creation. What's amazing about this absurdity and the absurdity of humanity is that this has been embedded in our faith. This is not something that I'm inventing, but it's been embedded in our faith since time memorial. Some of you may think it's entirely inappropriate for a preacher and a former called pastor, now overseer, to talk about somebody pooping his pants on Great Friday. It's not very church-like. Sure, some of y'all are embarrassed by such talk. And that's the point. I want you to feel that. I hope that you can relate to that a little bit and put up the graphic. That's exactly what makes the history of our faith so rich. You see, this is the first known depiction of Jesus. This is the first drawing and the earliest drawing that we have depicting Christian worship. And what it is, if you'll show the second one now, a clearer drawing, you can see that it's someone being crucified, and it's someone whose head is as a donkey. Axomonos is God. Axomonos worshiping his God. That's what it says in the Greek. And what it is it's a depiction of a Christian who's worshiping Jesus. Yet Jesus is depicted as an ass. This is the earliest depiction of Christian worship in Jesus that we have. In other words, we have gotten past the shame of our claim. And I don't think we should. We ended up ruling the world. It's nice to come into a building of this size, to worship freely, to expect everybody next to you to believe the same thing, to live in a country that claims to believe this very thing. But this shame, this embarrassment, this is our roots. This story, this is the importance. This is what's being told. We worship a God who got crucified? Ha! What kind of God is that? What kind of God is that? A God that could be hung on a tree, and we know that cursed is anything that hangs upon a tree. A God that could be cursed according to the very religion that he was the king of, and according to the world system that he was the king of. Romans saved crucifixion for criminals and Christians, the two most revolting people on the face of the earth. Why were Christians so destabilizing, revolting? Why would they be equated with criminals? Because they gave slaves value. Because they gave women value. In a world where men dominated and slaves had no personhood, Christianity came along and said, hey, you in change. He died for you. Who died for me? God. If this is true, and God is like this, then everything changes. Then your worth and my worth is no longer theoretical. We don't have to invent it. But it's anchored in something eternal. I think I said that, and I'm not sure that you guys know what I mean by it. So I'm going to just pause for a second and reemphasize what I mean by that. Without the God-man Jesus, what makes you valuable? Without the God-man Jesus, where do you look to say, yes, I have inherent value? You can invent it. You can try to create some kind of standard by which humans have value. Atheists try to do it all the time. Other religions try to do it. Well, you're in the image of God to some extent, and you're created and loved by God to an extent, but fundamentally, we're truly replaceable. One of my favorite verses that I love when preachers say it, because we all know it isn't true, is when God says that if you don't worship me, the rocks will cry out. You know what I say when I read that? Nah. You know why I say no? Because it's one of those verses that, just like he says in Genesis 6 when he says, man, I regret creating you, we know he doesn't mean it. Daddy says things when he's angry, but he's daddy. And those rocks ain't replacing me, because he'll never get to a point where he wouldn't crawl down again on that cross for me. If I could be replaced, I would be replaced. And every other belief, every other system makes me replaceable. I don't know how you feel about aliens, but I find them curious, and I find the whole conversation around them very interesting and timely, because what you see is a lot of people who are starting to talk about them being our origin, them being our guides, them being, right? And I think, what happens to every other religion when aliens land? Let's just say it's a government psyop, it's real, I don't know, you can name it whatever you want. Demons, which most likely in my opinion. What happens? Every other faith has a hard argument to make at that point, because there is a gap between them and God. There's only one belief system that can stand firm and say, you know what, nice to have you here, hope to take you for some coffee, but we're irreplaceable, because we are in the image of God himself, and that is Christianity. There's only one belief system where I wake up and see that I have the same hands as God, I have the same experience as God, the same body as God. And I don't mean that identically, but I mean that in form. That I am valuable because he is, and I am made in his image. It makes me permanent and irreplaceable, and it makes everyone permanent and irreplaceable. It makes us more than an accident. It makes us more than disposable, because we share form with God. And it means that we are worth pursuing even unto death. And it means that even those who don't claim him are worth pursuing even unto death. Not just me, not just you, but the father who abandoned you, the mother who beat and neglected you, the sibling that can't seem to get it right. God not only says, are they worth saving, which is where most of us stop, Sherman. Oh, they're worth saving. But God says they were always worthy of my image. They look like him. They breathe like him. This is the absurdity of Great Friday, that love and not power is the rule of the universe. That human dignity is inherent. It is earned. It is not earned. It is given by God. It's the absurdity that ends wars. It's the absurdity that feeds widows. And it's the absurdity that fights slavery. It's the absurdity that creates human dignity. Not because it makes sense. It does not make sense. But because it's true. That is Great Friday. And I know that everyone in here knows who Jesus is. I hope that this message can help you know who you are to him. And if you're watching online and you don't know who Jesus is. Let me tell you that everything that I just said, I would bet my life on. I have bet my life on it. If you want to know if I believe it, my presence here is the evidence that I believe it. I've bet my life on this truth. I can't rationalize an argument for you. I can't. You can always counter. Confirmation bias will get you to believe whatever you want to believe. But I can tell you this, just like Paul, a guy who was killing Christians, who then writing one day converted his life to Christianity when he saw Jesus say, "Why are you doing this unto me? Paul, why are you persecuting me?" And he dedicates his life to this belief that God became flesh and died for us to free us not only from ourselves, not only from the world, not only from sin, but into the knowledge of his absolute love for who we are. And like Paul, I've had a similar road to Damascus, where at some point in my life, I realized that this wasn't something that my mother gave me. This wasn't something that I married into. This isn't even something that I concluded on my own, but this was something that was handed to me, the insight and knowledge and revelation that yes, Jesus is God. And I have the chance to bet my life on it, and I'd make that bet every time. Doesn't make life easy. As a matter of fact, it makes it far more difficult in ways that you weren't expecting. But it makes it worth it. And I encourage you this night. You're getting ready for Easter. There's going to be a lot of people that see this after the fact, maybe even after Easter. I don't care. I just am looking for that one person that wondered, that needed to hear about Jesus in a different way. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, I invite you to know who Jesus is as God. Stop. And if you feel the conviction and the weight of a presence, if you feel like this is you, if you feel like this matters and resonates with you, that's what we call the pool of the Holy Spirit. That is God himself moving upon your heart to say, son, daughter, I mean you. I value you. I love you. And I want you to be in covenant with me. What does that covenant look like? Do you have to dress a certain way, act like a certain way, do a certain thing? You don't have to do it. You didn't do anything to get it. You don't have to do anything to keep it. You'll change. You will change because of what your Father has for you. You won't want anything else. But don't let the fear of religious standards keep you from the covenant that God has called you to with him. Because the same way he died 2,000 years ago with his eye on you then, he has his eye on you now. And he loves you in such an extreme way, it's hard to believe. Accept Jesus, and you will be satisfied with waters that are unending and bread that fills. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Rach, you want to dismiss? You want to sing a song or anything?
Biblical communion community referred to the profound unity, shared life, and fellowship among believers, rooted in their shared faith in Jesus Christ and his sacrificial death. Communion is not merely a ritual but a horizontal and vertical act of fellowship that unites believers as one body with Christ and with each other. It is a celebratory, yet solemn, family meal that acts as a physical reminder of Christ's sacrifice, fostering unity among diverse believers, as highlighted in 1 Corinthians chapter 10 verse 17. Communion is a proclamation of the gospel and a sign of anticipation for Christ's return.